Yo, PlayStation. The next 4 years, according to Reforge Gaming. Kind of a long one, so let's get right into it.
All right, so what do we think the next 4 years for PlayStation will look like? This is, I think, a fair question and probably a pretty common one right now that people are asking. You know, we're halfway through the gen of the PS5, and we have a lot of games where we don't really know when they're going to land. We have a lot of studios, and we don't really know what they're working on. But I actually think we have good information about what the cadence of games will look like for the next 4 years. We've got some insiders recently sort of speaking out, some journalists on some of the projects and their timing. We even have an image from one of the earnings reports that I think kind of gives a clue as to how they're thinking about things, even with something that Hermen Hulst said recently and how they sort of view games. I also think they have a secret weapon that hasn't really made landfall yet, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment because I do think they have thought rather broadly about how to grow the PlayStation platform, and it reaches beyond just sort of the traditional, well, we're going to do single player, and oh, now we're going to do live service. I think some of the other things they're leaning into will really pay off well, and that'll also just add more games for us to play. Now, if at any point during this video you like what you hear, make sure you hit like and subscribe.
I will.
I've been trying to do the uploads more like the live stream, just sort of like a discussion and a conversation. So if you want to be here for those debates, make sure you're subbed to the channel. So let's just start with what has...
Who would you rather punch in the face? Reforge Gaming or Dreamcast guy? Let me know in the comments.
been said, and I think we have to take sort of a multifaceted approach here. So one of the big questions about the games coming out is, are they coming out soon, next year? You know, you got Wolverine, big question mark. You got Intergalactic. Many of us assumed it was coming out in 2026. But Jason Schreier said from everything he knows, and he's very reliable with insider information and having contacts at the studios and such, he said, no way that thing's coming out before 2027. Now, there was a recent leak that...
Everything we know, I'm assuming he means everything we guess, because this is less a roadmap and more a horoscope for PlayStation fanboys.
It was like targeting late 2026. That's been sort of shot down. It seemed as though the leak was essentially doing what commonly people do, is they take all the available information and they just sort of act as if they've seen the game, and they just kind of confirm things we already know. There was also recently Mag, middle-aged gamer guy, he did a video saying that Venom will be arriving late 2026 and then Wolverine will be 2027. Now, if that's true, and we think about sort of the timing here, that's a little bit further out than I was expecting. I thought Venom was going to be sort of a surprise late this year in 2025, and then we'd see Wolvie show up in 2026. But Mag also has been very reliable with sort of how he couches things. Then there's this earnings call image that I saw where it sort of showed right now, and it had Yote and Death Stranding 2, which are kind of their two big titles this year. And that really coincides with what Hermen Hulst said when he was sort of asked about the first party portfolio in sort of a back and forth. He said that Death Stranding 2 and Yote were the next big first party titles coming out. And many people, I pointed out at the time, well, that means they consider something that if they're publishing it, they consider it first party, because they obviously don't own Kojima Productions and they don't own Death Stranding, and yet they're viewing that as a first-party effort. Now, he didn't include Lost Soul Aside, which is a publishing effort, but I think he didn't include that because they were specifically talking about the PlayStation. And Lost Soul Aside is different in that China Hero is PC and PlayStation day and date. Now, I'm going to talk more about the China Hero project in a little bit. There's a lot of games that probably should be on your radar, and they're looking really good, but not a lot of people know about them, because you have to go to the China Hero Project website, and the trailers are a little obscure. And what I think that earnings call image does, though, is it also emphasizes what's coming next. They have Intergalactic sitting there, and they have Wolverine sitting there. And I think this is important, because when you look at this earnings call image, what you're dealing with, I think, is you're dealing with sort of this idea that they have this two-game philosophy going forward. At least that's what it seems like to me. You're going to get roughly two of their studios or two of their pointed publishing efforts every year. But since we heard that Intergalactic is not in 2026, and then we also just heard that Wolverine is not in 2026, I think we can now kind of predict when games are coming out and what games specifically. So if you just consider the cadence right now, let's just talk about that. So I think it's roughly 2 to 3 first-party games a year. That's their goal. We know Xbox was very forthright with saying they wanted one good game, one big game at quality every quarter. That's roughly 4 games a year. That has been really difficult for them to hit. They haven't really done that consistently at all. So I think 2 to 3 is maybe more reasonable. Probably the biggest year in the PlayStation 5 gen was 3. It was Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, and God of War Ragnarok, kind of all in the same year. I mean, that's not going to...
The cadence he's praising, it's like showing up to work twice a year, asking for a raise. This is the same company that once dropped God of War, Spider-Man, The Last of Us, and tight windows. Now we're celebrating Helldivers and hoping for a fair game to deliver. Come on, man, please.
Be typical, but I actually think some of the years upcoming are going to be pretty big. So if we just look at 2025, it's Ghost of Yotei, Death Stranding 2, and Lost Soul Aside. That's 3. Now they're all in different camps. Yotei is a first-party studio. Death Stranding 2 is published by PlayStation, but they don't own the studio or the game. And then Lost Soul Aside is a China Hero project. Again, they don't own the IP or the studio, but they're publishing the game. It'll also be on the PlayStation and PC day and date. So it's a very multifaceted approach to the year. I think next year, 2026, we're seeing Saros, we're seeing Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls, and then Venom, according to the most recent leak. That again is 2 to 3, but they're all in very different camps. You've got Venom, that's pretty big, that's Marvel, that's Insomniac, even if it's smaller like Miles Morales, that'll be a big game, that'll be a big mover. And then Saros, first party studio.
He's calling Rise of the Ronin and Helldivers 2 a strong start. One's a niche team ninja game, and the other's a third-party co-op shooter with server issues. If this is momentum, it's like rolling a pebble downhill and calling it a landslide, bro.
Studio, but probably a smaller game because Returnal is great. It's one of my all-time favorite games, but that's not exactly the kind of game that you would think is like this giant narrative-driven tentpole, but it is a first-party studio. Then Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls, again, we're in different territory now. That's probably considered a live service game by PlayStation. It's not their studio, and it's not their property. That's 2026. Now, according to what we're hearing, 2027 would then be Intergalactic and Wolverine. That's 2 pretty big titles. That's Naughty Dog and Insomniac. That's 2 brand new games, 2 brand new franchises from those studios. I would hazard a guess there would probably be a third game that year. We're going to get to that in a moment because there are all the China Hero project games, Mina Hero, India Hero. There's also all the live service games that are sort of hanging in the air that we don't know about. What I think this would mean then is if the recent rumors are true that the PlayStation 6 is more likely landing in 2029, which I have said for a long time, I thought they were going to extend.
Off topic, but did you guys see the new Zelda? Let me know what you think of her in the comments. I just heard about it a few hours ago. I'm so glad we got her instead of the other option, if you get my drift.
This generation. Even Cerny had recent remarks about multiple years going forward. It's almost like he's thinking that the PlayStation 6 is not around the corner. It's not like 2 years away or 3 years away. 2028 as a late arrival, 2029 is what many people are now speculating. Well, that would mean 2028 is going to be that awkward year where if you have a bunch of titles hit in that year, they're sort of landing just before the new gen starts. That happened with The Last of Us Part 2. That happened with Ghost of Tsushima. You have these games land very, very late, and they seem almost before their time, and they land just before the new gen starts. I think 2028 would likely be when Cory Barlog's sci-fi game finally shows up, and the Horizon Zero Dawn online game. Not the MMO, but the one that Guerrilla's actually working on that's supposedly going to be like a Monhun-style game in the Horizon universe. Now, the reason I think these 2 games would be perfect for that year in particular is it sort of frees up the next big God of War and the next mainline Horizon game to be PlayStation 6 launch titles. So that would mean that 2029 is then the PlayStation 6 launch year. That's at least what I think. I'm just kind of theorizing here, timing. Even if it's late 2028, I would imagine the 3 big dogs would show off to kick off the PlayStation 6. And those are Spider-Man 3, the next mainline God of War, and the next mainline Horizon game. That's a pretty big start to any gen. But if you think about the timing of when Spider-Man 2, Ragnarok, and Forbidden West all...
I don't know if I'm gonna get a PS5. Anything Sony might do, like I'll get a new handheld. If Sony makes a handheld, I'll get that. But I think I'm done with consoles, man. I just don't like the direction they're going. I'm pretty happy with my PC, to be honest.
Came out, that really does track. I mean, that's a lot of years in between, and we know sequels tend to come out at a faster cadence anyway. But my gut instinct is they would want to hold those big three, especially if the entire way there, every year we're getting 2 to 3 really good publishing efforts from PlayStation, whether it's Saros or Venom or Marvel Tokone or Intergalactic or Wolverine or Barlog Sci-Fi game or this online Horizon game. I think all of those are going to be considered, I think, good publishing efforts from the studios. You can't, I don't think.
Yeah, 2025 is a magical year, man. You got games like Fair Games, Marathon, Ghost of Yote. Hopefully we get Concord or something. But yeah, everything's coming together this year. And we're going to get a lot of games we didn't ask for too. But you know what? That's okay.
Look at PlayStation's publishing efforts and only fixate on the first-party studios because they're spending their publishing dollars in a variety of ways. They're also navigating a lot of things that are coming. So let me just talk about why I think this cadence is good, why I'm not upset about this. I am going to acknowledge the disappointment that people are going to feel from me saying this. If they're like, well, if this is accurate, I feel like that's disappointing. I'm going to acknowledge that in a minute. Let's just talk about why this is good. First and foremost, 2026 is going to have GTA 6 in it. And everybody has to sort of navigate around that. We saw that this year. Nobody would pick a release date after like August, maybe September. Nobody would say anything. Now all these games are trying to shift around. It's almost like I would not be surprised at all if we go to like Gamescom and there's a bunch of new release dates and things that are starting to like slam themselves into the end of 2025. And the reason for that is it's now empty, right? We don't have the big GTA 6 landing. So that is something that has to be navigated by PlayStation, being that they're going to be the largest platform for that game. They have the most consoles in circulation. They have a good relationship with the company. It stands to reason that GTA 6 is going to be enormous for PlayStation. I think they've even acknowledged this in like earnings calls. Like they're going to see an uptick in console sales. They've got a lot of people, like 60 million, who haven't switched over from PS4, and this is going to be one of those games that gets a lot of people to do it. That might make sense as to why, when you look at 2026, Saros and Venom feel like smaller games. Well, it might make sense to have some of your smaller games hit during 2026 because you're not really wanting to put any of your big mainline titles in the same calendar year as GTA 6. I mean, I don't think PlayStation navigated all of this from that far out, but if they have things they can kind of shift and move, whether it's Wolverine or Intergalactic, and they can bump it by one more year, if they can do that and still reap the benefits of GTA 6, I believe they would do that. Now, the other thing to consider here is third party is also starting to heat up. I feel like every time we turn around...
Oh, yeah. That I do agree with. Third party starting to heat up. I could pretty much agree with that. Third party's been doing awesome. Indie studios and shit.
We've got trailers for games, like people are getting better with the Unreal Engine, and when we enter the second half of the gen, that's when big games start landing. That's when big hits start landing. So they have to navigate that as well. They can't just like stomp all over their third-party partners and the relationships that they have with them. They're wanting these studios and these publishers to leverage the PS5 Pro, to get familiar with PSSR. That's another factor here. We're hearing that PSSR is going to implement...
Alright, I don't really feel like doing the rest of the video. It's all bullshit. I don't know. I just want to sit here and talk to you guys. Like, what's been up with you guys? What games y'all playing? What are you excited for? Are you gonna get the PS6 or the new Xbox? Are you gonna get the new handheld? Just let me know. And I love you.